Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
In the military, veterans answer the call to serve. Now it's our turn. At Hire Heroes USA, they're changing lives, helping veterans and military spouses secure meaningful careers, all at no cost.
With over 100,000 success stories and counting nationwide, they're connecting skilled veterans with employers who recognize their true value. Visit hireheroesusa.org to access their services or to support their mission. What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey.
You can't stop me! You don't got the power, shut me down. That's not an option. I'm my biggest problem. You don't got the power, shut me down. That's not an option. You can't stop me!
Hey, we're back, John.
We are back. Welcome.
Yeah. Yesterday, you and I met for coffee with the head of communications for Hire Heroes USA and learned tremendous amount of information about that organization.
Yeah.
Which we're proud to be fundraising for on December 14th.
Yeah, I'm excited to link up with Hire Heroes. Obviously I've done some work with them in the past, but they exist to help military members make the transition from service into the public sector or the private sector. And they are just doing some phenomenal things. They're growing like crazy. They're actually growing faster than they've got the manpower to support. So it shows what the need is in the industry. So really excited. What was shared with us yesterday is it's about $1,000 to $1,200 to get a military member transitioned into the civilian workforce. That's everything from resume writing to coaching to helping get him or her into some placement groups, get them to some career fairs. So, every $1,000 to $1,200 is helping that family transition and really providing some amazing benefits for them. So I'm super excited to get teamed up with them on the 14th. Hopefully we can raise a significant amount of money to help get some of those service members placed. But yeah, it was a great meeting yesterday. I think we got a lot worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they can share a data point like that, where every $1,000 to $1,200 creates a job for the men and women who have served, as well as family members. It's not limited to just the service members, but also their family members as well. And they're the leading organization doing this. And I won't go into all the details of what he shared, but the organizations that they work with, some of the fundraising events that they've done are really incredible. I mean, you're talking about some of the best and most valuable organizations in the world are partnering with them to do these things. And, us as sort of a smaller scale startup working with them and helping them.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be doing that with this organization. And I hope the December 14th event is a success.
Oh, I think it will be. We've got some great responses already. It's filling up. And so, man, when we fill up that room, it's going to be huge. So excited.
Awesome. All right. Do you want to kick us off, and then I'll intro our guest here, Sarah, who we're super honored and excited to have. But why don't you just sort of recap us on last week, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Second Act podcast with Michael and John. This is episode 11, and we're thrilled to have another guest speaker on our show today. For those of you that are new, Michael and I, are living out our second acts in real time for everyone to hear so that we can provide the lessons learned and help you avoid the pitfalls that we have discovered, hopefully allowing you to have a more seamless and more successful journey in your life's transitions. On our last episode, part 2 of the All on the Table, where I put Michael on the hot seat to answer questions about his childhood, growing up in Miami, Air Jordans, and the events that influenced his life and his experience in tech.
Yes. We went in directions on that conversation that I wasn't expecting to go in, but it brought me back to my childhood, and I do have some vivid memories of some of those things. So I've, I'm grateful for the childhood I had, and now, where I am today, I want to pay it forward to everybody else who could use a helping hand.
Yeah.
So with that said, in this episode, we are sitting down with Sarah Gonzalez, a highly accomplished and inspiring leader who spent the majority of her life in Texas, not born and raised, but close to it, and currently serves as the president and chief operating officer of Panorama Mortgage Group, where she plays a pivotal role in the success of the organization, overseeing day-to-day operations, as well as spearheading strategic initiatives. Sarah has spent the last 25 years in the mortgage industry. She is all too familiar with navigating peaks and troughs in her industry, which is a topic we've covered in the second act in entrepreneurship, but it exists even within an industry that you've served for a long time. But on top of that, she's had to deal with the added dynamic of being a woman in a historically male-dominated field. Sarah is committed to corporate social responsibility and sustainability, integrating ethical practices and environmental stewardship into the organization's operations. She's passionate about making a positive impact on society and strives to create a better future through responsible business practices. And on top of all that, Sarah serves on the board of directors for the Mortgage Collaborative, is also a co-founder and the vice chair of the board of directors for Women of Alice. So I'm looking forward to, Sarah, you sharing a little bit more about that. And when Sarah's not working or doing all of these side hustles, projects, endeavors, she's also a mom, a wife, a daughter who actively engages in philanthropic activities, supporting various causes and initiatives aimed at social upliftment and community development. And I'm also proud to call Sarah a friend. So lots to get into today. Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that introduction. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, lots to talk about. I know you've done a few podcasts, and I don't know if they've been industry specific. This is a little more general in nature. We can certainly go down the professional working road if that's an important part of your story, for sure. But we are open to taking this in any direction you want. So I think it's easiest to start with sort of the beginning. So you're born and raised in New Jersey,
Yes.
but mostly lived in Texas. Tell us a little bit more about your childhood and some of those early life events that helped shape who you are today.
Yeah, sure. So again, thank you both, John and Michael, for having me on.
It's our pleasure.
This is a little bit different than some of the other podcasts I've done, but I'm happy to share my story. I think it's an important part of who I am today. And, it's a representation of all the fails and all the wins, and combined together, you're seeing me, right? So I was actually born in New Jersey, like you said. My mother was in the Army and my dad was in the Air Force. So they were both stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, and that's how they met. They fell in love. They ended up getting married, and then, of course, had me. Now, my mom's side of the family lived in upstate New York. So my grandfather was a prison guard at Attica State Prison. For those of you that may know that place, it's pretty infamous for the riots back in way before I was born. But so we did live in upstate New York for a while. While they ended up having myself, and then they 18 months later ended up having my sister. But my dad, eventually was like, I've had enough. I'm from a little small town in Texas. I'm ready to move us down. And so I find that relevant because that trip my dad took from New York to Texas was done on a motorcycle without a helmet.
Okay.
And,
Wow. Okay.
And long drive. I'm sure a lot of pit stops, but when he got to Texas, unfortunately, he got into a very, very bad accident, and was thrown off his bike, skid across the road, had a huge traumatic brain injury, Of course, my mom, flew down. She brought my sister because she was a baby, and I ended up staying up there for a while. But I tell you this part of the story because there is a lot in my story that has to do with my dad. And when that happened, it changed him forever. The person he is today is not the person he was prior to that accident. And so I can get into a little more of that as we talk a little bit more about that story. But that's how I got to Texas. Eventually my dad got better, and they were able to get me down to Texas to rejoin the rest of the family. And here I am. I've been here ever since.
Wow. Where in Texas, Sarah, if I may ask?
So I grew up most of my life in a small town in East Texas called Gun Barrel City. Yes, you heard me correctly, Gun Barrel City. It's on a lake.
Love it.
Out
Only in
East
Texas.
Only in Texas. And graduated high school there, and even started my career in that small town. And eventually got away from the small town and headed up to the city, which we all call Dallas here. So
okay, and you got started in the industry in that town. What was your first role in the mortgage industry, if that's what the industry was at the time? Yeah.
Well, I mean, back then, I was young, and part of the story of my dad is that, I was out on my own before I graduated high school, because of various things that were going on in the homestead. And, so I found myself trying to find any reason to get out of the house even before I was 18. So I was working at 15 at the local Dairy Queen, which, got a little better as we got older, but I had a hardship to work there. And eventually took on a couple other little odd and end jobs there. And I used to work for this printing company that was in town, and they used to make all of the letterhead, business cards, and whatnot for all the folks at a mobile home lot called Kaufman Mobile Homes back in the day. So Kaufman is a small city about 15 minutes northwest of Gun Barrel City, and I used to have to deliver all of that supplies, and they used to hound me all the time. I was 18. They used to hound me, you got to come work here. You could come answer the phones. And I'm like, nah, I got a great job, And one day they just made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I mean, when you're 18, money talks. So, you almost don't really care what you're doing. I mean, I guess there's probably something you just don't do. But in that moment, I took up that opportunity. I needed the money, and frankly, working on that mobile home lot is where I got my first processing job, learning how to process loans for manufactured housing, both new and used. Eventually, that story takes a really weird turn where I was eventually sitting on the used home lot and taking cash from people that were putting down payments on homes, and, ran an office by myself. And I think back to this time now, and I'm like, there's no way that I would ever let my 18-year-old daughter do something like that. But, back then I was on my own. I was scrapping and trying to get by, and, needed to make money to live. So that's kind of where it all started. Eventually that place closed down. And I had a recruiter reach out to me about a job with a company called Check, which was Syntex Home Equity. Back then, they had a huge office in downtown, but I took a job on what they call MSO titling, which is basically tying mobile homes to land and calling it real estate. So I was pretty much an expert at that, and started there. So really, when you think about my first big job, that was it, because eventually I ended up moving to that big Dallas location there by the Rolex building in downtown. And I was commuting back and forth from the little town in East Texas to Dallas, and eventually was like, I can't do this anymore. It's ridiculous. I'm on the road 2 hours one way. And back then I did not have a nice car, so it was tough, but it was worth it at the end, and it landed me jobs after that. And I've been very, very fortunate, and that, the good hard work that I've put into things has really paid off and made me a little bit of a go-to. I've never had to really go out and find a job. I know that sounds probably really snobby and narcissistic, but someone's always been there. I think a lot of that has to do with faith, and that just somebody else is out there looking after me make sure that I'm in the right place at the right time. But it also takes my head to make that decision, right? So whether or not I'm going to take that risk or not take that risk. So, I've been extremely fortunate when it comes to my career and how it's grown over the years, and progressively just taken on more responsibility and more responsibility to get to where I'm at today. But I'll tell you, I started at the bottom of the bottom. I mean, when we talk about answering phones and processing loans at a mobile home lot, it can't get any rawer than that. So,
Sarah, I was going to say, Sarah, we talk about on this show, we talk about how people that have made it to the top, that's when they're recognized, and people say, oh, wow, that must have been really awesome that you made it to where you are now. But very seldomly are we able to tell those true stories. And I just can picture you 2 hours one way in East Texas driving for your job. I mean, that is where grit is made, and that's where you have so much time to think about who you are, who you want to be, and what the circumstances you're in, at the moment, and where those things are going to propel you. That's, we talk about, again, the 10,000 or 100,000 hours before you become something great. You spent that time in the car developing yourself to where you are today. That's really where that molding took place, I think.
Yeah, I mean, definitely had a lot of time to think about, what I wanted my future to look like, because I'll tell you, I didn't want it to look like the house that I grew up in. That was for sure. I was not going to be that person, whether it be my mother or my father, who both I love very much still to this day, but they came with their own set of challenges growing up, and has really defined who I am today. But you have to consciously think about, do you want to be something more? And you have to make the effort, right? There's a lot of faith that's in that, right? That somebody's there by your side guiding you through the way, but you personally have to do the work, right? Somebody can be there and give you hope and give you guidance, but you have to put in the hours. You have to put in the work. I see so many times over and over and over again, where victims such as myself as a child use that as a crutch. And some are just unfortunate and just cannot get out of that for whatever reason, whether they're stuck in a system or something along those lines. But there also is a very conscious effort that has to go into working really hard to get out of those situations. I didn't get any handouts. I had to work really, really, really hard. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what I could do. I didn't even know that I could do some of the things that I've done. But it took a lot of conscious effort to get that far in life. And I've taken jobs. I have literally taken jobs and said, I can't believe you're offering me this job. I have so much to learn. And they're like, you're gonna, you've proven time and time again, you can do it. Let's get in. That, and a lot of times people will say, those are sometimes the best opportunities, because you have a fresh set of eyes, new lenses on to look at things a little bit differently than maybe people have in the past. So, while, I've taken some jobs without, the 10 things listed on the list that are required, maybe I've taken one where I've only had 6. Traditionally, that's really hard for women. Most women want to fulfill every single need and requirement on that list. But I've taken some jobs where I haven't had all those things, and then I've grown into the role. The role has become part of me, and me not necessarily be part of the role.
Wow.
And there's been some special people along the way that have given you that opportunity, and it sounds like you've risen to the occasion, even though you may not have met all of the requirements for the job, you pushed yourself, to John's point earlier, demonstrated grit and executed on that job to deliver and maybe blow away the expectations of that person who did extend their hand and help you out to help you move up and get out of, wherever you wanted to get out of as a younger age. And I can certainly, we all come from varying degrees of humble beginnings, small town, city kid, middle class, poor, whatever it may be. And, I think that is helpful in some ways because you sort of get a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. You're like, I can do this too. It's not just the folks out there that have an easier path in front of them. That helps you have that grit and push yourself. And, you said your first job was working at a Dairy Queen. My first job was actually around 15, working at a little convenience store. I played tennis growing up, and I worked in the convenience store, the cash business, and I was trying to figure that out. And then I was doing some bookkeeping for it was like a wholesale fabric company in Miami, Florida, and just trying to do everything I could to build some skills and learn about business and learn about life. And then somehow I wound up in a fortunate experience. Someone had offered me an opportunity to do something, and I didn't want to let that go. And you just sort of run with that, and then it compounds itself over time.
Sarah, what advice would you give to that individual that's maybe in that grind season? They're spending a lot of time in the car, or they're spending a lot of time doing something that is potentially, they feel, taken away from their true potential, and maybe feels like a breakthrough is out there somewhere, but just is face down, just in the mix every day. What kind of advice would you give them, going back to your, that part of your story?
It's funny you ask that, John, because my involvement on the board and as a co-founder for the Women of Alice, we talk about this a lot, right? I go back to whether we want to talk about the car or, many other times that I've been trying to find my way, right? Not just what I was going to do from a career aspect, but what did I really want out of life? What did I want, when people thought of Sarah, what rang to mind? What were the maybe 3 adjectives that came to their mind? And so one of the things that I kind of talk to young women about and that are coming up and that are trying to figure out, their way is, number one, just be honest with yourself. There is some aspirational techniques that I think you can use and aspire to, but you have to be honest with yourself first and say, if I aspire to do these things, do I have what it takes now in order to do that, whether it be the grit to put in the time and effort, right? If you're really, really trying to climb the ladder, I can tell you right now, no one's giving out their secret sauce on how to do it. You're forced to learn that a little bit on your own. And I think what we can do from my generation and those that are before me still in the business, and I don't really care what industry you're in, is we can provide a little bit of that secret sauce and be a little bit of a mentor and a little bit of a guiding light to how do we get to those spots. Maybe not necessarily faster, but just a realization. I mean, if I could have avoided a couple of mistakes that I've made, I've be honest, I've been married 3 times. All of them had their benefits, and I look back and people say, "Would you change anything?" And I say, "No." You know why? Because it made me who I am today. So but if I look at those things, I need somebody to talk through that, right? Because we're really good at beating ourselves up, saying, well, if I would have done this, or if I would have done that, or if that person hadn't been in my life, you have to own that, right? It was your decision to stay in that environment or say those words or do that thing. And so I think, my advice when you think about being in the car, driving by yourself, own who you are today. Do you even like yourself? If you don't like yourself, what do you want to change about yourself? Who do you aspire to be? And once you believe in yourself and you know who you are, I feel like really the sky is the limit at that point, if you're willing to put in the time and effort to do what it takes to get something done. I've got an amazing job, but it's a tough market right now. So
Yep.
while I have an amazing job, it's way tougher than the job I had before because of the market. And you have to learn how to adjust and pivot and not be so full of yourself that you can't be humbled and, make adjustments, right? Nobody owes you really anything, but you owe yourself truth and honesty. So, again, don't know if that answered your question, John, but I think back when those times, and I knew I was not going to be my parents. I knew I wanted something bigger for my life. My mother used to drive 2 hours in and 2 hours home for many, many, many years, as far back as I can possibly remember from Dallas. And while I was doing that, it's not really what I wanted to do. So how could I get into a position that I could live closer to that job? Because I was never going to get to be where I wanted in that small town. I had to make a move, and I had to figure out how I was going to make that move. And it took a lot of really looking at myself and saying, what are you willing to do? And what is that going to cost you? So.
Wow, that's good.
So, Sarah, in those moments of self-reflection, those inflection points where you've even tried to figure out, is this your second, third, or fourth act? And for those listening who are about to experience those moments themselves, are there any stories in your journey? You've sort of given us the timeline and walked us through your personal journey growing up and then professionally. Any specific pivotal moments or wake-up calls, for that matter, that have caused you to reevaluate what's important, what success is, and what you plan to do differently?
Yeah, so I don't know how you categorize them. I don't know if it's 2A, 2B, 2C, or if it's second, third, or fourth act. But, my first jolt of reality happened when I was 8 years old. And I walked in on something that I probably should have never been privy to. And it was two parents arguing. But this was not just any normal kind of argument. This was a very dramatic and physical and emotionally charged argument that really had no basis of even happening. And my initial instinct was to help. I have to help my mom. I have to step in. It didn't matter that I was 8. I didn't think about age or size or whether it was appropriate or not. I just had that initial reaction of charging and helping, like making it stop. And that help component is still physically built to me today, almost to a fault, where I am able to look at things a little more holistically and find areas of opportunity to step in and maybe help in a situation, and not even necessarily from a work perspective. I think as I got a little bit older and, hit lovely puberty and started becoming a young woman, I think things changed dramatically with my father in the sense of, from 8 until maybe about 11 or 12, for those 4 or 5 years, it was just kind of like I was a gnat to him. But then once I got to that about 11, 12, certainly 13-year-old mark, he started to see me like my mother. I was now a woman that was challenging what he wanted done, or he didn't like this, or, maybe he had too much to drink, whatever the case may be. And that attribute of looking at, my mother in that situation and then me in that situation now, made me, I believe, to be a very proud woman, meaning, I know what you're doing is wrong. And just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that I'm doing anything wrong. The problem is you, it's not me, right? And so to be able to really understand and not sit in a corner and say, well, it's my fault and I should have done this and I should have done that. I've gone through those moments in my life later in life, through one of my relationships that I've had. But, back then it made me really embrace being a woman. And I'm not a fluffy woman. I'm a very firm and fair, very strong person that, can be emotional. I think I'm much more emotional now after certain things have happened in a woman's life at 45. But I definitely look back on those times and I think about, wow, that, my dad, while he was doing a lot of naughty things, also really shaped me into the strong woman that I am today, because at the end of the day, I wasn't going to take shit off no one, whether it be him or anybody else. Okay, I know the difference between right and wrong, and I will stand up for what's right, and I won't stand for what's wrong. And then I think as I got a little bit older, eventually moving out of my home and, really having to sustain a lifestyle on your own, I look back on that person today and I would say back then I felt very scared. I felt very scared. I wasn't sure if I was going to, be okay or not. I had a lot of faith. I mean, I talked to God a lot back in those days, a lot, because I didn't have anybody else to talk to. You couldn't talk to school because somebody'd be showing up at your house. That would just cause more problems. I really couldn't talk to your family's friends because they're just going to tell your parents and say that you're overreacting. And then you get in trouble that way, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of outlets for me to talk to people. And so I talked to God a lot. As I got on my own and I think back to that really scared girl getting on the bus one day, literally left everything, clothes, car, everything, got on a bus, go to school, and I never looked back. I have never been back home since that time, at least living from home. Obviously, I've gone back and seen my mom and things now as an adult. But I think about that now, and I'm like, man, that took a lot of courage. That was a big risk.
Huge.
That took a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And back then, it didn't feel that way. Back then, it felt like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm scared to death. And so when I think about that, and I think about some of the choices I've made as a woman, and risks that I've taken, I attribute that to how I grew up. I was cornered in a wall. I needed to make a decision, and those things require a lot of courage and bravery.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, being backed into a corner doesn't feel any better today than it did back then. And so other emotions come up when I do feel like I'm backed into a corner. I do think there are some negative things that I've brought forward into my adulthood because I don't want to be that kid in a corner that has no way out. And those tend to affect me differently in a more non-positive way. So, you have to take the good with the bad if you're willing to accept your past and learn from it. But that, I think, just part of living life, honestly. So,
Sarah, I want to go back, hearing this portion of your story now and hearing this growth from this, scared 8-year-old that's confronted the issues that are right in front of her and growing in the way that you have and becoming this woman of strength and really an icon within your own industry and your community. You've obviously taken that into what you alluded to earlier, into the Women of Alice. And you also talked about there's 3 things that you help in Alice. One was honesty. I'm knowing this part of your story now, I would love to hear what those other 2 points are and more about Alice and what Alice does.
Yeah. So Alice, just to give you guys a little bit of a highlight, it is a 501c3 nonprofit that is helping women in finance, whether they're an aspiring leader or a senior leader that is looking to network and, get into an inspirational room that will help them find their next journey. Okay. So we have a lot of aspiring women in our industry that, want to get into executive roles or senior leadership roles and they just don't know how, right? So they're either don't know how to do it, or in a lot of cases, there's even women that will suppress other women, right? That's it. You want to talk
Sure.
about cattiness? I mean, let's be honest. Women can be catty, and they don't want anybody to supersede what they've already done. So I'm not going to claim to be that. I've known people like that, but fortunately, I know less of those, and I know more women that are willing to help other women find their way. And so when I talk about that secret sauce item, John, it's more about the mentorship, the networking opportunities, the inspirational stories. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but your podcast is about telling stories, right?
Yeah.
And you think about
Yes.
all the times you're with friends or whatnot. Why not tell stories at work? Why not share those stories at work with other people that can help learn from those stories? And so, Alice is there to help women achieve, okay, the A in Alice, lead, inspire, cultivate, and empower, okay?
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
we're here to help those women achieve whatever they want to achieve, whether it be personally or professionally, and through that system. We have about 65 really active members. We do have an upwards of 80 that are involved, maybe just can't always attend everything, but that network of women range in women that are less than 40 who are trying to, may already have their dream job or just trying to get higher up the ladder, all the way to women who are thinking about retirement. And we have conversations around, if you're in that part of your career, how do you get on how do you get on boards? How do you consult? How do you maybe transition into retirement? What does retirement even look like today for women? We have so many tools, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but we have so many tools and things today that tell us, hey, midlife for me is probably 45. I'm probably only going to live to 90 based off what I know about my family and maybe some predisposition items in my 23andMe. I mean, if you think about all the things that are available to you now through technology, you could start to really plan your future a lot more proactively than maybe my mother's generation or the generation before her. And so we really try to work with these women on, and I'm one of them, right? I think I'm kind of in the middle. I'm a senior leader, but I'm also aspiring to do other things with my life other than just be a president and a COO of a mortgage company. There are other things that I want to do in my life, and I need that encouragement and so forth through that nonprofit
Community.
Yeah, that community. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, the hardships, the perseverance, the success you've achieved has led you to this point. And I don't know if Alice is your second act or if it's just part of your second act or third act or however we want to describe that. But it seems like this is something incredibly important to you and that community going forward, and that can sort of follow you wherever you go if you were to leave the mortgage industry behind. And all of those things that happened in your life sort of culminated into the creation of this. And then there's other things sprinkled in there that people are experiencing as well. We hear stories about health scares. We hear stories about other family issues, unexpected job things. What advice or other information can you share with folks as they contemplate joining the community or pursuing something like this? If they reach that midpoint in their life, like you have.
So I definitely would agree with your comments about Alice being part of my second act. I say a part because I think my second act, as well as probably some others, was in 2020 during COVID. And I had a lot to think about back then. In the beginning, it was, this is just another thing. And then things changed dramatically around the world. And I'm not going to say I felt one way or the other. I just felt compelled to do more than what I was doing. Like I wasn't fulfilling my full potential. I wasn't looking at myself in the mirror, John, going, who are you and what do you want to be? I was just kind of playing into the day-to-day all the time and really just focusing on, I just got to get the kids to school. I just got to get this project done. I just have to have these 3 meetings and a dinner later tonight. I really wasn't focusing on all the things that that were really important to me that I just kept pushing off. And so 2020 for me is probably when my second act started, because I really took a deep dive into, yes, I wanted to have a successful career, and yes, I still wanted to be a mom and be a wife and all of those things. But I was really, really passionate about a number of things. One was Alice, for sure, and I'll come back to that. But one of them was going back to school. I had not finished my degree plan to get my undergrad, and so I went back to school. Now, mind you, I got through a lot really, really fast, and now I'm kind of back to that daily grind thing and have to reevaluate. And so I'm being honest with myself, saying, hey, you have to reevaluate. But another part of that was Alice. And, I had been involved in an executive women's summit community prior to COVID. And things changed monetarily for a lot of businesses back in 2020. While the business was good in the financial services sector, because of COVID, it seems like it takes a crisis in the world to have a good mortgage industry. It's kind of sad, but a lot of people were pulling back on things. You couldn't really go anywhere anymore, and so there were a number of us that had looked at. So I'm a co-founder with 3 other women who are notably on the website. There's 2 others that are not on the website that did have a say. But we all came together and decided, we had been a part of an executive women's summit that was no longer more. And we wanted to take that platform and really turn it into what it is today. We were very, very, very adamant about it being a nonprofit. I was extremely passionate about education and making sure that whether we're talking about mentorship or opportunities to bring in speakers to educate or whatever the case may be, really passionate about that piece, as well as the other co-founders. Our goal was what I explained earlier, was to go out and really make a difference in our industry. And what perfect timing was it to start that? Now, we technically started that right before 2020, but it really laid into, and you know what? We still were able to keep members. We were still able to do all that stuff virtually through COVID. So we didn't have to put on a big in-person event. We actually still kept members and still kept people engaged through that period. So, those are things that were really important to me in 2020. I had to get super focused on my dad. My dad had gotten really sick in 2018 and had asked me for some help. I had struggled with him quite a bit back and forth from 2018 till about 2020, and ended up having to find him some more permanent care. Now, mind you, he's in his 60s at that time, and it was really difficult because of his age. So those are really kind of some of the main 3 things that I worked in back then, and I think those are 3 things that are still very near and dear to me now, along with everything else that I have going on. But it's interesting how a lot of that stuff kind of came full circle. But I have to remind myself from time to time, like give yourself a pinch or whatever you want to call it, to get back to what I'm supposed to be doing, because you get really easily caught up in the day-to-day stuff. And look, at the end of the day, if anything, I took 2020 to really focus on my family, my marriage, being a part of my kids' lives, really get into a place where I could get back to God, and really focus on things that were really important to me. So while I had a lot of things I was doing for other people, there were things that I was doing with for myself, which included those other things, but things that I were doing for myself in my marriage. I'd been on the road a lot, work, tough jobs make for tough home lives. and especially with somebody that doesn't necessarily understand, the industry. So really, really shifted a lot of my focus on my family. And I would say it's still that way today. If something's going to go long or if I'm going to miss something, I just don't anymore. I just don't.
Wow.
It's just a hard no. It's boundaries. And I've learned that over the years that you got to create those boundaries.
It's amazing how, COVID really made a lot of really strong leaders like yourself reflect on how they got there, what they're currently doing, and where they want to go. And so many stories I hear, these leaders go back and really work on that foundation, the foundation of their faith, the foundation of their family, the foundation of the core of who they are and what's driving them. And the true leaders that have stories like yourself from pulling up their bootstraps and really making it happen to where you were at 2020 is really reinforced in that time, almost like just a pause. We talk about the second act pause or just a time to reflect. Yeah. And then you hit the ground right back where you were and running and charging and making such dramatic moves again when you can. It's great to hear that in your story as well. So thanks for sharing that part.
Yeah. I mean, I told you a little bit earlier about when I was in the car and I had to think about like what I was willing to give up. Okay. You give up a lot sometimes to be successful. Yeah. And there's a saying, people will say, you can't have it all. Yeah, you can have it all. But on 100%, if you look at a pie chart of 100%, you just can't have 100% of it all the time of each item, right? So you got to be willing to pull those levers and adjust those levers. Over the years and even past 2020, those days of like, I still work really, really hard. Don't get me wrong. Anybody listening to this podcast, I still really work really, really hard.
No doubt.
But I can tell you, I'm very selective about the people I let in my life. And if they're toxic or they're people that don't believe in, that don't align with my values, they might be nice to haves in your life, but they're not needs to haves. And those need to have relationships have to align with the things that I believe in and the things that I find to be successful. I'm done wasting my time on people that don't genuinely care about you. They just want something from you. And, we hear all these sayings in the workplace and even in friendships and even in family that you need all of these people. Maybe, but do you really? And are you willing to sacrifice the things that you've worked so hard for, right? Because back in those days driving that car, I didn't have a family. I have a beautiful family now. And I have a freshman in college, a freshman in high school, and a 7-year-old son. And believe me, we're busy. But I'm not willing to sacrifice who I am or them for anybody at the end of the day. And they're everything I do. This podcast, choosing to do this podcast, I want them to hear it someday and be proud of me, not be embarrassed or like, wow, I can't believe she did that. So, everything you choose to do, everything always costs something. What are you willing to pay? Yep. What are you willing to give up? And just some non-negotiables for me are around my family and just my sense of ethics and responsibility to myself, health-wise, and just sanity-wise, and to what I want to give back to everybody
society.
That surrounds me.
Yeah,
it's good.
So, Sarah, your life journey, all of these events, you sort of wrapped them up into the newfound perspective you have and continue to uncover. They've been wrapped up into a permanent reminder called Fortaleza. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Fortaleza. And we're not talking about tequila, folks, okay? So
tell us a little bit about that.
you look in the mirror and you see so many versions of yourself. It just depends on maybe how much sleep you got or maybe how proud you are of something you did. I don't know. But, I guess I don't want to say that I've now branded myself, but, I did give myself a tattoo. I paid somebody to give me a tattoo.
Yeah.
I did not give it to myself. However, it is my handwriting. So,
Okay.
if I'm on camera or I'm in the mirror, I can see it. Otherwise, I really can't see it. But
Okay.
it is a permanent reminder, Michael, of the journey. And Fortaleza, it is a word in Spanish. Fortaleza is the word for like fortitude, like fortified, like strong. You might get a couple bricks knocked off your castle, but you're still standing. You may not be perfect, but you're still standing, and I think that wraps me up. Not necessarily the events of my life, but it represents who I am. I am my own castle, and I have had people try to climb the walls and infiltrate me in a way that may not be healthy. I've had people infiltrate and be very healthy. Get a family through that. And then there are people that try to knock you down, try to take over what you're doing, try to take your ideas, any of those things. And I still stand strong after all of those attacks or, things that have happened to me over my life. And I just think it's how I feel. It's a permanent reminder of how I feel about myself. And so when I'm feeling like maybe I'm not strong, that is a permanent reminder that, yes, you are. And while it may seem something hard is going on in your life, just think about all the stuff that you've gone through your entire life. There are some things that just cannot be tougher than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
That's good.
you have to put perspective in some of the things that you might feel weak about or not sure about sometimes, and just put it in perspective, because a lot worse things have happened. And I've been able to overcome those things. So again, it's about having that faith too, right? It's that constant reminder of, you're going to be fine. It'll work out. It always does. I don't know how it always does, but it just does. And you're still standing, and you haven't compromised who you are as a person for other people.
Wow. Absolutely. Amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
But I do get the tequila comment. They're like, why do you have tequila tattooed on your arm? I'm like, no.
Man, Sarah, that's awesome. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're coming to the end of the time we had planned here. Sarah, are there any final thoughts or advice that you want to share before we start to wrap things up?
Just be kind. Please be kind. You don't have any idea what somebody is going through.
Yeah.
And the world can't really take a beat up on everyone. And some people just aren't as strong, right? And just when I think I'm strong, there's people stronger than I am. So just be kind to one another, and know that there are some people that are going through way tougher times than you possibly could be. And if you can just be a friend or even a good listener, the world would probably be a lot better place.
That's good. Wow.
That is an excellent way to wrap things up here. And I couldn't agree more. And I guess a last question for our listeners, how can they find out more about the Women of Alice and some of your passions? What's the best way for them to find you and your organization?
Absolutely. So if you're interested in Panorama Mortgage Group, we do have a website. You can approach us that way. Certainly, I'm available on LinkedIn and other social media outlets like Instagram and Facebook. If you find me on LinkedIn, you might have to look me up with my maiden name in there. So that would might be a challenge. But if you can look up Sarah Gonzalez, that's how you can find me on LinkedIn. You can always instant message me there. But reach out if you have questions for how to get involved with Alice. We do have a website too, womenofalice.com. that you can also go out and take a look to as well. A lot more about that program and how we sponsor women and grant them the opportunity to visit with others. So
that's awesome. I love that acronym. Military is all about acronyms, but sometimes they're not as powerful as that one. So I'm hanging on to that one. Sarah, it has been a pleasure. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about where you've come from, the ways that you became who you are, and now how you're giving back inside your community. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I know that our audience is going to get a ton out of this episode. And man, I know I learned a lot. I know I've been inspired, and I want to encourage our listeners to reach out to you and really dig into the other things that you're doing, because it's pretty empowering and impactful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me share my story. Sharing stories is always wonderful, but it's scary at the same time, because you want to be careful about how much you share. So
yeah, that's true.
It's progress for me, and it's part of the healing process. So thank you guys for letting me.
That's true.
Absolutely.
On the show.
Thank you.
Sarah, always a pleasure. I echo everything John has said, and you continue to impress me. So all the best in your growth of Alice, and we shall stay in touch.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right. Michael, I'll see you next week, brother.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, Sarah.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballinger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.